Right. Okay. Let me start sharing that one. Right, I'm going to switch my camera off just to make sure I don't have any bandwidth issues. So hopefully you can see the welcome slide there. Nod if you can.
Looking good, mate.
Cool. Right. Great. So yeah, just a bit of an overview. Announced it a few times already, but first up's going to be Claire. Thank you very much, giving us a bit of an overview on what's going on in HR. You may have seen it. If not, then you may, expect to find out now. But yeah, there's a bit more information on what's going on there. Alex then follow on the HR trend with a little bit more information on Microsoft Viva, and then at the end we'll have a bit of a HR panel. Obviously, not thinking about the changes, thinking about Viva, thinking about where it's heading. Is it something that we think now it can start challenging its competitors? How far do we think it is off from that? So, big announcement, like I say, we'll cover off. We are looking for some more speaker opportunities as well. We've got plenty of content to cover. We would like a bit of variety in the people we're speaking with, so we'll cover off that later. But yeah, anyone who's willing to cover off either some of these topics we'll cover or some of the other ones, please shout up. The more the merrier, and the variety is key here. We really want to engage as many people as possible. So without further ado, if I pass over to Claire, if that's all right, and she can give us the news on the big announcement if you've not already heard it. A bit more information if you have.
I'm sure everybody has heard it.
Woo!
Okay, let me share my screen, and can you let me know when you see it?
Got it clear for me.
Okay, great. So evening, everybody. I'm Claire Purdue. I am a technical specialist for Dynamics Finance and Operations at Microsoft. I've been at Microsoft for nearly 4 years now, a lot longer working with ERP, but at Microsoft for 4 years. I'm primarily aligned to public sector, but I do work across industries, and that is particularly with regards to HR. So what I'm going to go through today is walk you through not only this big announcement, but some of the roadmap and some of those technical pieces that we have from Dynamics 365 Human Resources, and where it is that we're heading as we move forward with the application. If I get to move on. Okay, so today, and you're probably all aware of this, we've got two separate sets of human resources capabilities. We've got that standalone application that you all know as Dynamics 365 Human Resources, and this is where we've been making our investments from a capability perspective for the past 3 to 4 years. It is a carved off version of Dynamics 365 Finance legacy HR module. And around 5 years or so, we carved out those capabilities and put them in this standalone application on its own infrastructure, its own release cadence, and had it being sold separately, licensed separately. And that's the way we were moving. We were moving forward in that direction. But then we still have the legacy HR module within finance, which, like I mentioned, was the baseline for Dynamics 365 Human Resources. And many of our customers are using the standalone application today. And many are using Dynamics 365 today, and some are using both. Many are using both. So we got feedback from partners, from customers, from the field around having those two sets of capabilities, that it sometimes can be confusing. When do I use one versus the other? And what does it mean from that perspective? But we've also gotten feedback on the release cadence and how the application can be extended. So Dynamics 365 Human Resources is sealed. And so from an extensibility perspective, we rely on the Dataverse, formerly known as CDS, the Power Platform, to extend if there are any white spaces that needed to be filled in relating to business processes, whether these are regulatory or policies that you have within your organization, to fill in some of those spaces. As a result of that feedback, we're actually going to bring them back together again. So we're going to merge the infrastructure between the two and bring those capabilities that exist in the standalone application back into finance. At this point, it really is important to note it will still remain as a standalone license. It hasn't changed. There will be no changing to licensing what you or your customers currently have. It doesn't change. But from a capability perspective, you're going to finance to have those capabilities instead of having your standalone application. So this will help create some clarity as to what application to use. There isn't a choice between the legacy HR module and the standalone application. They become one thing as far as those capabilities go. But the really big piece, and I think everyone will agree here, is from the extensibility perspective. So if you think about all the things you can do in finance relating to extending business logic, creating different screens or windows that look like the rest of the application, making it in the flow of the work that people are doing, creating custom entities that if there's a specific data that you're needing to track in a different way, being able to create those custom entities, whether from an integration perspective or others. All of those capabilities would now be available in human resources that weren't necessarily there before. And this is really one of the driving factors, or is the driving factor. So not only do you have the Power Platform to be able to do those extensions, but then you also have the ability to do some of the extensions within the application itself from a business logic perspective. And it will also help drive a lot of consistency between HR and the other operations applications like finance in terms of your application lifecycle management, your lifecycle services, the geographic availability. And geographic availability, it may not necessarily apply to all customers. Like I say, I work in public sector, it doesn't always apply, but it will make a difference to those customers that you need that geographic availability and those where it does apply. So we've spoken about the extensibility and other things as well. And it does help drive that consistency. So if we think about how we release HR versus how finance is released, which is the second part of it, they'll now have that same release cadence. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in the next slide. But looking at it also from a platform perspective, Human Resources is a standalone application. It's carved out version of the legacy HR module. So when we look at that platform perspective, and we look at that client underneath really how that experience and how the user interface looks, it's the same for the most part between finance and human resource application. And there have been cases though when we've got to evaluate something from a human resources perspective of whether the infrastructure, that standalone infrastructure, can support some of those capabilities that are coming from that platform. When we're in the same infrastructure, that doesn't need to happen. And to give you an example of that, if we look at it in finance today, you've got your embedded Power BI reports, those dashboards, they can be modified, they can be changed. And in HR, you can't modify them because that capability didn't come across. But once those infrastructures have merged, you'll be able to do all of those kind of things. So all of the things you can do in finance, you'll now be able to do those kind of things related to HR as well. My slide clicks isn't going through. So we've talked about consistency. I was going to say we've talked about consistency a little bit, but actually we've talked about it a lot because it is the main focus of this area as well. And management of we've talked about management of environments again through lifecycle services. So when we look at that consistent approach through that lifecycle services, and we take an example of something you can do with finance, so looking at searching for issues, you can do it on the finance side. It isn't available on HR because of the infrastructure on the HR side. But there's also that tooling from regression perspective that are available within LCS that aren't available to HR. And one of the big areas relates to upgrades, updates and hotfixes. With HR, we release every 2 weeks. All of our customers using standalone Dynamics are on the same version. We don't have anyone not on the same version. So we roll those updates every 2 weeks. Whereas on the finance side, it's a monthly update and you have a little bit more control over to which update you take. And the process is a little bit different on the finance side. You choose when to take those updates, whereas on the HR side, those updates get pushed out to you. And it's the same from an integration perspective. When we talked about that a little bit as well, how you integrate data will be the same cross applications because it's on the same infrastructure. One of the things that is not needed once that infrastructure is merged together is an integration between Dynamics 365 resources, human resources and finance, because the data will all be in the same database. So there won't be that need for that intermediary integration to get the HR data into finance to be able to be used in other business processes. So when we look at that from a consistency basis, it works really well. And with integration, again, Power Platform, virtual agents, dual rights, all of those things that happen from a finance perspective will now also be available for HR. From a functional merge perspective, what we're doing is taking the capabilities that exist in the standalone application and merging them into finance. So there's going to be a functional parity between the two. If there are like features, Dynamics HR will take precedence. And what we'll be doing is in the feature management of finance, we'll be using that to take the capabilities to flow those HR capabilities into finance. They'll show up in that feature management, and you can then enable that as you see fit. So as customers are looking through that and how they want to enable those features, they can choose which ones they're going to enable within the system. Important to note, and what is key, is we are not removing anything. We haven't necessarily identified at this stage anything that's redundant between the two. And the steel thread that's running through this whole process is we don't want to break anything on either side. And that could be business processes, integrations, any of that. Things aren't going to be removed. Things aren't going to be replaced as much as we possibly can. And we know there's going to be scenarios where features get enabled by default when that merge happens, but we want to make sure this is documented and there's enough notice. So we're going to be taking that, and as we find those that are going to be enabled by default, they'll be documented and enough notice will be given. We may modify some things. Some things may at some point in the future be removed, but we have a process that we will go through from notification process. From a notification perspective, if we need to deprecate any features, but we haven't identified any of these yet as we're going through the process. I would anticipate that there will be some, but if we do, they should be minimal as we move them across, but we have not identified any at this point in time. And when we think about the capabilities that exist on both sides, we all know that the investments have all been made in that standalone HR application. And really, most of those have been those net new capabilities. So if we take that leave and absence module, for example, it exists in HR. There isn't really the equivalent in finance. There's some capabilities, but they're pretty limited. So since there isn't an equivalent, this will come across over wholesale because it's net new, brand new kind of functionality. And it's the same with the benefits management that have been added to Dynamics HR. It's net new, that's going to come over as well. So when we think about some of those capabilities that exist on the HR side, there really won't be a whole lot of churn or change once the infrastructures are merged together. Some things like you think about jobs and positions and how they're managed, because that core functionality really hasn't changed a lot, we wouldn't see a whole lot of change on that. The biggest change is from an experience perspective, and that would be in the workspaces. So if we look at the standalone HR app, in some of the workspaces, we've got that blue header across the top. We've got some tiles, and when you click on it, the upper right-hand corner, got different looking grid below. So when we do merge those infrastructures, those kind of experience changes will be different. None of the capabilities will be removed, but the experience of how they use them may be a little different, and that's to align with the user experience that exists on that finance side. So as I mentioned, everything will come across through the feature management and can be enabled and be tested once we bring things across. And I'm hoping I didn't hide the last slide, so we're about to find out. There's a slide after this. If it's hidden, you'll have to bear with me while I show it, because I think it's a timeline slide that's quite important. I mentioned briefly earlier about the international availability. So all of the regions that finance is available in, HR will also be available in. It'll hold all the same certifications as the other operations apps as well. There. And from a timeline perspective, we are in the process of doing the engineering work as we speak now. Release Wave 2 2021 starts in October, and this is when these capabilities will start being available in the finance system. We'll start previewing some of those features through the same process that's used with finance today. It's in the peak release, and this is when things will really start lighting up. And then we could incrementally add capabilities in each monthly update from a finance perspective, with the goal of having everything done tentatively and obviously subject to change by January and February of next year. And for customers that are both using finance and HR standalone or just HR, we do have that migrations available. We're going to be releasing some tooling to migrate from one infrastructure to the other. we'll have that for those using just the HR standalone, as well as those using both HR and finance. So we're going to provide that tooling and also the documentation to be able to migrate the data from a standalone application to the finance infrastructure. Any changes that are coming in will be in those release plans. And as I said at the beginning, nothing changes from a licensing perspective. It's still licensed separately, still sold separately. This is only and all about merging that infrastructure to make things easier. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Claire. There are a couple of questions in the chat.
Okay.
I think we've got one from, I'll put it in the chat. You okay to ask a couple of questions? Got one from Ludwig saying, does the change have any implications on other integrations to finance? For example, the project ops to finance integration, human resources are maintained in finance and project ops.
Project ops to finance at the moment isn't really go via HR unless you've got it via HR at the moment. Do you have your skills on your resourcing, or because that would be using the finance to project ops, so that wouldn't have that implication with ISV. So it shouldn't have any implication on the Dynamics apps at all. But when you're looking at, if you've got integrations to ISVs, I think Microsoft are working closely with those ISVs to make that as seamless as possible.
Sweet. If that doesn't answer your question, I'll do please shout up. We've got one from Kayla as well. What's the risk to customers who use BC as they move to an isolated app made using D365 HR cheaper for their ability to use?
I would have to find that out, Kayla, because I don't do that. So I will find that out for you.
Cool. Has anyone else got any questions they want to ask before we move on? We will have the panel later on if anyone wants to chip in there as well. But Stuart thought HR was general availability in January.
HR, what within finance?
Stuart, do you want to clarify?
Yeah, so we are starting to, as we said, it is coming through as part of the October 2021 release. There will be those peak plans, but we're not going to do a big bang approach of it. It potentially won't be everything that's coming through. So we're hoping to finish the actual full going across by January, February, but that's not guaranteed. Obviously, timelines will change, but they will start in around October.
This is a good one for Kay. That's what I was thinking as well. So there's the migration tool I think is going to be made available, if I understood correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is that going to be something that people can just handle within LCS, or are they going to need some sort of technical person to support
that? I don't know yet, to be honest with you, because it's still in process of being written. But it will have that full documentation, etc., available. So hopefully in the next coming months, we'll find out a little bit more, and it will potentially be a two-step migration process of those on the standalone app and those with the HR and finance capabilities as well.
Yeah, like was outlined in the timeline. There's two phases. Yeah.
Kayla's smashing out the questions.
I feel like we should cap Kayla on questions. What is the answer to customers who are now purchasing HR? Is there going to be an early adopters, as otherwise they may have to go on the legacy app?
So the HR app will still be there for a little period. Mm-hmm. They're not going to take it away in August or September or anything. We are still showing customers that legacy app, because obviously all of that functionality, until it moves into finance, until it moves over to the new infrastructure, will still need to be utilized. So once that's all moved, that's when you'll probably get the notification that no longer being the app, but we'll still need to move those over.
Okay.
That kind of leads on to Tracy's question. So the app's going to remain then until everything's been moved over?
There's been no announcement that it will be deprecated at this point in time. But it will be guaranteed that, well, I can't guarantee what product are going to do, but one of the areas will be that as when the HR app came about, all investment was in the HR app. Once everything's moved to the new infrastructure, the investment will be on the new infrastructure rather than the HR app. They won't keep two with the infrastructure side.
Yeah. You did just say the word guarantee, and we are recording the session, by the way.
I did say I can't guarantee.
Yes, you're done now.
Can't edit that. Yeah. I can't guarantee what product you're thinking.
Keith has added a very good question. Are there plans to make embedding Canvas apps in HR or FO more native that you know about?
There's not that I know about. That would be with the product team on what they're doing in terms of the Power Platform and F&O as a whole.
Oh, Kayla, that's a cheeky question that you're just asking. Gosh, I'm so sorry, Claire.
I think that's, I feel
I feel like we need to make Kayla come off mute to ask these questions.
Yeah. Next time Kayla asks me to do this, I shall say absolutely not.
Yeah.
Yes, you were asked to do this just so Kayla could ask you all the questions without, and she conveniently doesn't have strong enough internet.
Kayla, I would have emailed and asked Claire all these questions anyway. So.
Oh gosh.
Right. So does that mean that ERP is staying where it is in terms of the data structure and not moving closer to being integrated with Dataverse, or is that a product team decision?
It's a product team decision. At this point in time, we know as much as you do as technical specialists.
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing about it is the new announcement for Teams and the data being allowed in Teams for Dynamics, which includes both HR and ERP, but also the implications that will have on employee self-service and manager self-service functionality and things. So I don't know.
You're stealing my content, Kayla. You're stealing my content. Thank you.
At the moment, that announcement has been made, but they haven't got any finance side in there. We just know that team members are going to move into the teams, but other than that, it's a 2 to 3 year plan on what is going to move over.
Oh, so have they announced that team members will move into Teams then?
Well, no, they're going to do some of the team, as in not in as in employees into Teams. If they move that over, then that's what it'll be, a 2 to 3 year plan, because they've still got to do the Teams integration into the HR side of things, etc. So there's lots of stuff going on around that.
Yeah, so it's always going to go that way, isn't it, to be fair?
We'll all be one big happy family before you know it. Maybe even we'll include SharePoint with that happy family rather than the weird cousin.
You can get me, Kayla. There's no announcement. It's nothing. Employees rather than, it's because the licensing's called team members. You've got Microsoft Teams, you've got employees. That's all.
It's a lot of the same words, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right.
Cool. Right. I think now's a good time. So if we, great. Thanks very much for that, Claire, and apologies for Kayla. If we just move straight on to Alex, if you're good to give us a overview of the Microsoft Viva.
Yeah, I just thought I'd quickly say hello, my video on before I switch my camera back off.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so nice to meet you all visually. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. Hang on 1 second. Bear with me 1 moment. Interval music.
I was going to say we can always make some stuff up for you. I was doing an app in a day course yesterday, and in the time that it took between people to load their screens, I was pulling out the dad jokes.
Amazing.
So I'm not above doing that, but your screen has unfortunately just loaded. So I'll remember that for next time.
Yeah, you will all just have to excuse me. It's actually my 10th wedding anniversary. And when I said to Kelly that I'd do this, I didn't put 2 and 2 together on the dates. So I'm actually in a hotel room on my small surface. So I can only see my presenter slides. So I can't see any questions coming in. But if anything does pop up, Paul, as I'm going through, just shout me and I'll stop and answer any questions as we go through. But yeah.
Sure will. So, yeah.
Happy days. Right, so I'm going to make a start. So yeah, I'm just going to spend a little bit of time talking about Microsoft Viva. So thanks very much for having me. And thanks, Claire, for spending the time to discuss about the changes to the HR platform. I think it's a really, really positive step forward. However, if we could just park on that, because we've got the panel discussion to happen in a little bit. I just want everyone just to hang fire on any further questions, just while we stay within the HR discipline and the Microsoft stack, specifically focusing on Viva. what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to spend some time sharing my reflections of the HR landscape, today's workplace, and where I think Viva fits into the picture. For all those technical people on the call, I'm not very technical myself. I'm coming at this more from a HR practitioner's point of view. But if any questions do pop up, I can always go away and find them if I don't know the answers today. And just second slide, has my slide changed for everyone? Is it keeping up with me before we have to do some dad jokes?
It has, yeah.
Amazing,
So
thank you.
A bit about me.
Amazing. Okay, so before we get into the detail on Viva, I just want to spend a little bit of time introducing myself, as I think it helps put things into context. So for the last 3 years, I've been focused on Dynamics HR as a product. I worked at Power Objects, I then went client side, and I've been at PwC for the last year. But things were really, really different before my ventures in Dynamics started. I've been really, really lucky in my career. I've been fortunate enough to have many roles and many experiences. And the majority of my career has been spent working in the Manchester tech community. I started working off in PR and marketing. I then moved to e-commerce. I then had production roles, delivery roles, operational roles. But the biggest chunk of my experience was spent working at a company called Code Computer Love. And they're a digital product agency. And I led their talent function between 2011 and 2018. So my role was to support the founder's vision. It was about creating and facilitating a working environment where people could be brilliant, collaborate and improve. And it was a really pivotal role in championing the company's culture. We had delivery teams which were built and focused around certain products for different clients. And they all worked from the studio, and the clients came on site for specific meetings and key ceremonies, split from our partner culture where we're the ones who tend to be on the client site. We spent a lot of time, energy and effort invested in the studio, and it was designed so that each product team had its own collaborative working space. Everybody had their own desk. The team had an electronic Kanban board for the stand-ups and to visually display work and it being pulled through the team. Every team had its own quiet space, and they all had access to an event space for team activities, which is what you can just see on the slide at the moment. And towards the end of my time at Code, we really started to invest in technology to facilitate remote working. There are two main reasons for this. One was to allow clients to participate in more team ceremonies, but secondly, and more importantly, it was in response to many, many flexible working requests we were getting from employees. They were requesting to work from home a few days a week, and the main drivers were a work-life balance and the cost of travel. That's enough about me for now. I just want to spend a little bit of time talking to you about a survey that PwC commissioned. Now, this is not me plugging the companies that I work for. This is me just taking advantage of the fact that I've got access to a load of white papers. But in February of this year, they commissioned a survey of members of the general public. And the respondents of the survey included workers, business owners, contractors, students, people who are unemployed looking for work, those who are on furlough, those who've been laid off. And the survey polled workers in 19 different countries, including Australia, France, Japan, India, Spain, UK, US. And there were 5 main takeaways from the survey, and I just want to share them with you as it provides some context to the role of Viva in today's workplace. So the first key takeaway was that people are concerned about the job security. So the pandemic has already disrupted whole industries, contributing towards people's anxiety about the future. And as companies accelerate their automation plans and many jobs continue to be remote, employees across every sector will need to acquire new skills that enable them to think and work in different ways. The future isn't a fixed destination. We need to plan for dynamic rather than static tomorrows. The second key takeaway was that workers want to reskill. Now, in one of the pandemic's positive surprises, people who were given the chance proved that they could transition quickly to remote work while keeping productivity high. Where access exists, workers are keen to reskill as needed, but there's disparities in access to training, and that still remains today. Those who most need digital skills are the least likely to get them, and if this trend continues, we risk widening the digital divide. Leaders need to create more inclusive opportunities to upskill. Third takeaway, discrimination at work is holding people back. Now, the pandemic has illuminated racial inequalities and social tensions around the world. It also reversed a lot of progress towards gender equality, as many more women than men have left the labour market over the last year. And at the same time, many younger workers are not being given the opportunities to rise in an organisation. There's a real need to open up genuine, fully inclusive conversations about how to build more diverse and purpose-led workplaces. Companies need to ask tough questions and really consider the answers they're getting, and not just because it's the right thing to do. It's also good for business. A diverse workforce and deliberate inclusion efforts help drive better outcomes through different perspectives, creative thinking, and open collaboration that can lead to the broader economic development of our society, which benefits us all. The fourth takeaway, people want to work for purpose-driven companies, but not at any price. So a large majority of people want a job with a sense of purpose. This is not just about attracting younger talent, it matters right up and down the age scale, but economic realities, of course, have an impact too. So it's important to think about how purpose and economic success work together. 5, you'll all be surprised to hear, remote work is in demand. So the takeaway from the survey was, a remarkable low percentage of people who find that they can work remotely want to go back to the office full time. With that in mind, most companies are planning to maintain at least some virtual work or flex time. More than half expect remote working to be a permanent part of their workforce strategy, and as a consequence, they'll need a different kind of physical working space. As leaders reimagine the offices of tomorrow, we expect the focus to be on increasing space where people can initiate, develop, and strengthen relationships, where they can experience the culture and brand, and of course, where teams can come together, brainstorm, collaborate, and problem solve. Right, so since the results of this survey were announced, I think we're all very aware, a lot's happened, especially all around the world. And in the UK, we've moved on to a different phase of the pandemic. But getting a feel of what the workforce want is really more important than ever. And as businesses, we're already in that complex working landscape, and the addition of the pandemic has just added another level of the unknown. Like, will we have another lockdown? Do my staff want to travel to work on public transport now people aren't wearing masks? There's so many questions we don't have the answers to. And companies and the HR practitioners, they've been tested, and there's going to be many, many more tests to come. So how can a company like Code, for example, continue to champion a culture of brilliance, collaboration, and improvement in these times of uncertainty? How can they do it when the teams are not in the carefully designed studio that we invested so much money and time into creating? How do we create that environment when they're working from a one-bedroom flat or with 3 kids around the same table because a bubble has burst at school? Meanwhile, time for a little bit of a segue. Meanwhile, at Microsoft, I'm going to share some of my personal thoughts about what's been happening at Microsoft. I think Microsoft recognised that a massive shift was coming in regards to ways of working early doors. In around about 2018, their internal team supporting the Office Microsoft 365 stack evolved to the modern workplace with a massive push on Microsoft Teams. I think they anticipated a shift is coming to ways of working and that Microsoft Teams is going to play a pivotal role. Now, we can all recognise that the pandemic has played a part in the success of Microsoft Teams, but Microsoft had already made a shift internally that allowed them to scale quickly. They already had the team in place to make it a success. So what role does Microsoft Teams play in the employee experience in modern times? What role could it play for a company like Code? Last week, Microsoft identified, and I can't get over this number, they identified that they've got 145 million daily active users on Microsoft Teams, and the number is growing. Just a little side note, when I read that number, it just made me think of Ghostbusters. Lenny, you'll have saved the lives of 1 million registered voters. So we've got to keep in the back of our mind, there's a bit of social and corporate responsibility here, but there's 145 million daily active users on Microsoft Teams. Teams is where people start their day and stay in the flow of work. And it's in Teams that people meet, chat, call, collaborate, and increasingly automate their business processes. In a very real way, Teams has become the new front end for the world of work. Now, the introduction of apps in this space allows companies like Code to facilitate the employee experiences from Teams. Now, I just want everyone to take a moment and put yourself in the place of an employee. You log in first thing in the morning. What is the first app you open? Now, imagine a world where we could facilitate it so that all your work, all your team communication, and all the company needs are from Microsoft Teams, right? Just think about how we can help facilitate that experience. But more importantly, think about how the employee can facilitate that experience. By using Teams, they can manage the notification settings, etc., etc. It's just that one login to do all their work, etc. Now that we recognise what's happening in the world of work and position Microsoft Teams, only now can we start to talk about Microsoft Viva. Only now can we talk about it being an employee experience platform that brings together communications, knowledge, learning and resources. Only now can we champion it, fostering a culture where people and teams are empowered to be their best from anywhere. Only now can we see it as a tool to help address some of the key takeaways from PwC survey. And only now can a company like Code see the benefits of Viva in today's workplace. As apps on Microsoft Teams that they use daily to chat, message, collaborate, do their job. So let's discuss how each Viva app can help a company like Code. First of all, we're going to chat about Viva Topics. So for those who just need a little reminder, Viva Topics automatically organises content and expertise across your organisation, making it easy for people to find information and put knowledge to work. So for example, just imagine you're a new starter at Code, or you've been at Code a while and there's been a change to your role. You want to find information quickly or identify who are the people that you need to speak to regarding key business processes. Viva Topics, it uses AI to automatically search for and identify topics in your organisation. It compiles information around those topics. So say the topic is company onboarding, employee onboarding, changing role. What you'll get is a short description, a view of the Code employees who are currently working on the topic. You'll get a view of all the internal sites that are related files, all from Microsoft Teams workspace. Code would identify a knowledge manager or contributor to update the topic information as needed. And I could see that as being a role within the HR team. What they could do is they could have the role of managing the content, curating it, but engaging with the staff to create it, but they could be the people who manage it. The topics are available to Code's employees, which means that for every instance of the topic that appears in the modern SharePoint site in News and Pages, the text will be highlighted. The Code's employees can choose to select the topic to learn more about it through the topic details, and topics are also to be found in SharePoint search. So that's topics. Now I'm just going to talk about what Viva Learning could mean to Code, and just a brief summary for those who aren't familiar with it. Viva Learning is a centralized learning hub in Microsoft Teams that lets employees seamlessly integrate learning and building skills into their day. So in Viva Learning, employees and teams can discover, share, assign and learn from content libraries, both provided by their organisation and partners. And again, you could do all this from the team space. So what could this mean for Code? Well, for Code employees, it means that they could have a personalised view of learning content from both Code as a company and partners such as LinkedIn Learning. And as they continue to search for and complete more training, the recommended content will be updated to reflect their interests. So a few things that the employees at Code will be able to do is they could easily find learning opportunities provided by Code. They could browse courses from LinkedIn Learning, Microsoft Learn, Skillsoft and other third-party learning partners. They could search for specific learning content that appeals to them or supports their career goals. They could share relevant, interesting and important learning content with their team members or groups in Microsoft Teams chat or channel. They can like and save courses they're interested in, and they can play LinkedIn Learning courses in the embedded player without leaving Microsoft Teams as a platform. What can managers do in Viva Learning? So Code managers, they can keep their teams engaged and up to date with necessary skills without the need to coordinate learning across platforms. They can assign learning content to individuals or groups, share content with their team, and track the completion status of the learning that they've assigned. And then there'll be an admin role, which will just set up all the permissions and allow learning content from third-party sources. Third app, Viva Connections. So summary for those who aren't familiar with it. It's a curated company branded experience that brings together relevant news, conversations, and resources in the apps and devices that employees use every day. The Viva Connections for desktop experience, I believe this was formerly known as the Home Site app. It combines the power of the company's intelligent SharePoint intranet with chat and collaboration tools in Microsoft Teams. So Connections would enable Code employees to discover and search relevant content, sites and news from across the organisation right from their Teams app bar. Connections would also allow Code to incorporate their organisation's brand and identity directly in Teams platform. And then finally, the big guns, Viva Insight. Viva Insight, for those that aren't familiar with it, is the app that provides productivity and well-being with data-driven, privacy-protected insights and recommendations. Right, so by using Insights, Code could get insights to build better work habits, such as following through on commitments they've made to the team members, protecting focused time in the day that they used to be able to do in the quiet space, and have periods of uninterrupted individual work. And it derives these insights by summarising Microsoft 365 data. So that's data code already have access to about emails, meetings, calls, chats. So by using the Viva Insights app, code can do a number of things. So team members will be able to stay connected. They'll be able to stay on top of collaboration with colleagues through features such as AI-based task suggestions and meeting assistance. They will be able to protect the time, find more time to eliminate distractions, stop multitasking and focus on core priorities. They'll be able to send praise to team members, either in a private chat or in a Teams channel conversation. They'll be able to take more time reflecting. They could book that in the diaries. They could really prioritise it, check in how they're feeling, what they've learned, how they're going to apply those learnings. There's also the Headspace app, so for guided meditation from Headspace. You can always do your breathing breaks as well. You could also, I can advocate like a virtual commute if you're the type of person who used to commute into work. So your train journey in and out might be when you check in and out, or you might watch your latest series on Netflix or whatever you needed to do to check out your working day. You can mimic that with a virtual commute, and you can also use Microsoft To Do to take action on your to-do list. Right. So I'm now just going to be completely honest with you all. Until I committed to delivering this presentation this evening, I still hadn't made my mind up about Viva. I could really see the benefits of using insights on a day-to-day basis, but I really couldn't find a place for topics, learnings and connections. But by committing to Kelly that I was going to do this, it made me really take a step back. And it really made me think back to when I worked in HR and when I was working specifically at Code, and actually assessing it from an end user point of view, the company who were buying it. And by putting myself back in that position, I can honestly share with you all now how I can see the 4 different apps adding benefits for both employees and employers alike. But there's a few conditions around that. If you're a company that works with purpose, invests in cultures and ways of working, values your employees' opinions and ideas, and uses Teams as your communications platform, I really can see benefits for all of the apps. But the base content needs to exist in your SharePoint. You need to have the data in the Outlook for emails, calendars to do, and you might need to have the third-party ISVs in place or be ready to purchase them. Teams and Viva is the front end of that employee experience, and I could see a company like Code using Teams and Viva to continue their work championing a culture of brilliance, improvement, and collaboration during these uncertain times. Right. So what's next? During Insight last week, Microsoft announced 21 new partner integrations into the Viva ecosystem, I think to continue to position its place as the front end of the employee experience. Just looking at some of the companies on there, my arch enemy, Workday's on there, but can you just imagine being able to facilitate these business processes from the Microsoft Teams platform? I asked you all before to just think about when you log in the morning and you can just open one app. Imagine being able to facilitate all your business processes, your timesheets, booking your holidays, etc. through Teams, and then it just frees up all that time. If you have to use other products to do your job, you've just got that one core product for your company communications and your well-being, etc. And just finally, just want to talk about where does Dynamics fit into this story. So we've already got the Leave and Absence app in Microsoft Teams. And on the implementations that I've worked on, this has been a massive win. Clients love it. And with the recent announcements of being able to set up leave plans in both hours and days within a legal entity, and users being able to manage leave requests from Teams, not just view and request, users are going to be able to manage, so cancel, rearrange, etc. I think for probably the first time in a while, sorry Claire, we've got a real life added value benefit that we can talk about just from the HR platform, from the HR story. And following last week's announcement, and building on what Kayla had said before, following last week's announcement for the ability for users to view and edit dynamic sales records within Teams, I truly do believe that we're at the beginning of Teams being the front end for more dynamic business processes. You know, if you think from that sales thing, users can activate the flow of work in Teams. They can view and edit records in Teams. They can add Teams meetings to appointments and capture notes in Teams. They can stay up to date on records with automated notifications and connected workflows in Teams. The ISVs you just had on the previous slide, they're in Teams. and the fact they'll soon be able to see their apps and the fact that Microsoft are eliminating the licensing tax, that's historically held organizations back from this kind of integration, making these experiences available to teams, to any user at no additional cost. So I feel like we're at the beginning of a new user experience for Dynamics users, with Teams being the front end. In some of the implementations I've worked on, the usability of Dynamics, specifically the self-serve, has always been a bit of a blocker. And I'm imagining right now a world where employees could perform all the self-serve processes from Teams. So if you think about it, you've got Teams, you've got the Viva apps that sit on top of it, and then hopefully, Claire, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, in the future, the Dynamics HR, more dynamic self-serve capabilities will be available. I think that'll be a pretty cool place to work. And that's the end of my slideshow. I'm just going to stop sharing the screen and then hopefully see if anyone's got any questions.
Brilliant, thanks for that, Claire. We could have called that presentation in Teams, the amount of time you said in Teams.
Sorry, just a bingo. If people were taking shots every time I said it, apologies if you're drunk.
Has anyone got any questions before we move on? Oh, nothing in the chat, so great. Okay, right. Thank you very much for that, Alex. Just share my screen again. Perfect. Great. So moving on to our panel section of the sorry, apologies for the noise in the background. This panel we have every month. So topic of this month's panel, I'm going to quickly summarize it before I put myself on mute so other people can talk. Obviously with the HR challenge changes we talked about, the features that Alex has gone through as well, the extensibility options. Can it now actually challenge its competitors? And I'm going to stick myself on mute for a moment.
Everyone is now able to unmute themselves if you would like to actually participate in this discussion whilst Paul is here. So yeah, if you'd like to, feel free to unmute yourself and talk along. So I personally don't know much about the competitive world outside of the Microsoft bubble.
So I'm happy to kick this off. I still internally inside my own head refer to Dynamics HR almost as a beta version. I think the recent announcement that Claire's shared this evening is going to be the foundation for Dynamics HR to start challenging its competitors. Let's just use Workday, for example. It's a very sophisticated, mature product, but it also has the price tag associated to that being a very sophisticated and mature product. But by moving HR back onto the F&O platform and aligning it with the environment, etc., that Claire mentioned before, I think we're at the beginning of it being able to challenge its competitors. I think we'll win on price. I think we've got a bit of a way to go on features, but I think it's the start.
I think some of the
my two words in as well, sorry, is absolutely yes. If you position it as a platform, if you're doing feature to feature, it's not the way to win any deal. But if you're doing it as what can give you business value, when you're looking at it as a platform rather than just looking at it as HR, and that's in the legacy, we're talking now in the new infrastructure, but also before, then absolutely yes, it can and will challenge its competitors. But it's got a greater chance now it's back in finance.
I quite like that response, Claire, because I think in many cases you find that people just don't look at it as a whole platform. So I think that for me, if we are talking about challenge to competitors, I think if we're looking at it from a whole platform, I think we are starting something here. I see Stuart's got his hand up. Stuart, I think you can unmute yourself. Go on.
I can. I was just being polite. Is this the right forum to perhaps ask about a feature for HR, or is this not the right forum for that?
I think you can ask.
Probably a good to mention it to get to see if others share your views.
one of the things that we constantly challenged on for HR, whether it's separate or inside of F&O, is the onboarding process of a new employee, and the creation of, for example, of an AAD account. So we were looking at using something like MIM for an integration into HR or F&O, and there seems to be connectors available from Microsoft for all the competitors' solutions like Workday and SAP, but there's no sort of plugin or extension for F&O or HR into MIM for onboarding an employee. So you start your onboarding of your employee in HR, and the trigger from that actually goes away and creates their Active Directory accounts, for example. Is that a feature or something that's even on the roadmap for Microsoft?
So the slide that was hidden, or I accidentally hid that was going to form part of it, was the roadmap, and AAD integration is on there for 2022. But with regards to onboarding, so onboarding is, say, the old onboarding, it's where the platform does come into play to do it, or there are a lot of ATS providers that also do it as a pre-onboarding side of things. But the AAD integration is absolutely on that roadmap. That's not to say it'll stay there. It will be subject to change, but it is on there.
Yeah, thank you.
We also have Ian asking about payroll integrations as well. Ian, if you'd like, you can unmute yourself to further ask the question, or if that's enough for the rest of the team.
Sorry, I'm just remove the mouth of the dinner while I do that. Sorry about that.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
mate. It's always the right timing, isn't it?
I've only just got home. I've been in a nice, cool, air-conditioned office all day today.
Oh, I hate you. In the nicest way.
Yeah. No, so no, we were looking at HR about a year ago, and at that point, one of our mandatory prerequisites was payroll. That seemed to be offered by Microsoft in the US, and we're sort of advised that Dayforce was the chosen partner for payroll, but I'm not sure if there's any local other payroll integrations which Microsoft is considering to be either part of the product or preferred partners.
So Dayforce is a partner, so they're not the preferred product as such. That product or that capability for payroll will still be down to the individual customer, whether they want to retain their payroll or whether they want to go someone else. So there are other partners out there, but what we are doing is, with regards to those APIs, is bringing those from a payroll perspective. We've got APIs, we've got entities that we're publishing for partners to be able to build out those payroll integrations. They're in progress, so the base ones are there, and they'll continue to add more, and the roadmap for that would be well, it's now, so it's out now.
Lovely. That's smashing. Thank you. Thank you for that. Sales leads.
Checking to see if there's any other messages here.
I think just to put one thought process across, I mean, I am sort of pre-sales, if you like, for the D365 HR, and some of the feedback that we've had about Microsoft is it does look dated compared to some sort of other specific HR modules. So its interface basically is very ERP, and the fact that it's moving back into F&O, I think that's probably going to stay for a while.
That's the same challenge though that you have for the other integrations that you've got. It was mentioned earlier. So for example, like project operations and CE, where you've got people flipping between the two applications and they look very different. That's a challenge that we get all the time, is that we've got one, arguably people see it as one platform across the solutions, but they look very different. So I think that's a constant challenge, and I don't think that's going to go anywhere very quickly.
And I think, Claire, I think you did touch on it, that the the screens at the moment that we have in HR, the sort of activity screens, I call them, so your different list views and different ways of getting quickly to somewhere, you don't think that those are going to be staying?
They will go more in line with what finance is. It's not that they won't be staying, they will look slightly different. So the functionality will still be there.
Okay.
And I think going on from that, you're absolutely right, because I've had that feedback as well. But it is a 50-50 split. Well, it's actually less than that, because it's some people will say it looks out. Those people, hand on heart, will be the ones that wanted but couldn't afford Workday.
Yeah.
Because that's what they'll want them to do. Other users then will say, actually, the way it looks and feels makes usability and interoperability a little bit easier between the two when they were separate, because they do look and feel the same. They're very Microsofty, making navigation quite easy. And then you've also got that functionality. So when I've done a demo before, I've actually brought everything into, Kayla will hate this, SharePoint, to actually link everything together with the nice boxes with a virtual agent, etc., because it's all about what they can achieve in doing so. But I do agree with you, there are some differences, but I think it is a case of swings and roundabouts in a lot of cases.
Yeah, well, I think again. Oh, sorry, Alexandra, did you want to speak?
Please, sorry, Tracy, I'll build on it in a second.
That's okay.
Sorry.
The only other thing was, well, obviously, when you know a prospect does want a full package, so they're looking across the platform and they want ATS, they want learning, they want payroll. You know, the fact that we have to introduce Ceridian or ADP obviously is there's always a sort of a danger, shall we say, that, you know, those products deliver the same functionality that Dynamics does. And we have been in a situation where, you know, we might have introduced one of those partners and then ultimately they've then potentially taken the, you know, the sort of the deal, if you like, because of the functionality as it was at the time.
Yeah, and that always will be. And I think it's the positioning of payroll. You're absolutely right. But what I will say is that payroll's quite niche, and even those payrollers, when those payrolls, when you look at Ceridian, when you look at some of the others, they don't do global. So you will get those niche markets as well. And I think in terms of positioning, it's about that risk to the user, because actually your biggest risk of changing everything at once and going for a system where it's all encompassing is if you do want to change your provider, you have to change the whole platform. So HR, ATS, etc. And it's also really important that I'm looking at this extensibility as well, that the people we've partnered with, and Ceridian is not supposed to, what's been signed is if you bring them into a payroll, they can only go for payroll. So if you do bring those partners in, they are extensibility from the platform, they aren't bolt-on partners. So a lot of those areas in the terms of ATS, when you look at some of those, they're actually written on the CDS to actually come into the system on that ATS side. Learning and doing that API side of things is also on the roadmap as well to get more learning elements. And then payroll, we're never going to be a payroll provider, or at this stage, actually, they could change their mind later on, who knows? But at this stage, we're not. So there are other people to position, which are, you know, specialist payroll people potentially that you could have a look at. And if, because we've got those open APIs, then partners will write that and actually have something going forward for other customers to have a strategic partner that they can align to.
Yeah.
I just wanted to quickly go back to the usability thing. One thing that did come out on the release notes last week was in the F&O section. I'm just trying to find it on my phone, sorry now. There was a section about how they're committing in the next wave to about the usability of F&O. It's something about how they're removing the, you know, we've got the horizontal scroll, how that's been removed, and there's a commitment. I'm just going to find the link and pop it in a chat in a minute, where they'll actually talk about how they're going to make the end user experience a lot more usable. And I just want to quickly go back to, you know, that thing about Teams before. The win with clients about being able to use some of the functionality in Teams has been absolutely massive. So yeah, feedback, Claire, more in Teams, please.
That is the plan, Alex. It's the feedback.
Amazing.
We as technical specialists also give all the time as well, because that's the thing that goes down quite well, very well.
I do think ultimately that is the biggest sales message that we can win on, is that all of these other products are now trying to get themselves working with tools like Teams, because the mass uptake against organizations, especially in the new ways of working, I think has took everyone a little bit by surprise. I think generally speaking, it's going to be an industry specific sort of change, where some industries will see en masse now adoption because it's easier with it being in the ERP, whereas other industries it will be a little bit less difficult because there's still sort of niche functionality they would need that is not, to be honest, able to be nicely facilitated by the platform. So I don't know, and and Claire, to be honest, like we sometimes come across this quite often, don't we? It's when you sort of get knee deep into those sort of requirements somewhere or other. But it's a massively, brilliant change, I think, that needed to happen, and we'll see the difference hopefully within the next 18 months, where we'll be able to engage ultimately with customers we would have never been able to engage with before.
100%. I think Viva will also help that. So going from Alex's, so you've got that Viva, which will give you that employee experience. We'll go into then your learning systems to bring out those insights. So what are my peers learning, etc. That will all be on to Viva. It could potentially then with HR pull out the skills. So people with the same skills as you are learning this to increase their skills, etc. And that will bring that insights back into teams. With regards to HR, leave an absence there and then bringing more and more into those teams. And with the uptake that's been on teams, I think the only way is up on that side.
I am just checking if there is anybody else.
Yeah.
Alex, thank you so much for the links.
Nope. Okay. Right. I think we'll bring it to a close there on the panel. Just a couple more just to draw your attention to. So let me just stick back on the sharing. So you mentioned at the start, so we do have we do want to get as many people in the community and as many representatives as possible speaking at these things. We've had great engagement so far, which is really good. A few topics we've had suggested from people, so any other topics beyond this that people would like to focus on in future sessions, and especially if there's something close to your heart that you would like to talk about. It's a shame Ludwig's dropped off now because I'm sure he'd be keen to go through the electronic reports one. Here's a couple of the example opportunities we've had that we are looking for some volunteers on. So please let us know if there's anything particularly you'd like to speak on, or if there's a particular topic that you'd like to cover off as well. Julia's put a load of links in the chat as well. So, but if you want to keep on top with future sessions, see how things are going between the sessions, and just basically keep in contact throughout, then just have a look at our sign up to the group page, the communities page. We've got the LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, usual social media links in there as well. And then just a bit of an insight to next month. So we've got the lovely Justin lined up to go through some give us a session on portals with F&O and Dual Right. We're going to have a session on the data lake and the changes coming that have been announced and progressing in that area. We've got a surprise guest being lined up for that, and then we'll have a panel discussion, similar to as we do with every session we have, where we'll get the panel speakers, us, the admin team, and obviously all the attendees as well. So, any more, or
make sure you sign up for the meetup for August.
Say that again. Sorry, I didn't quite catch that, Julie. Sorry.
Make sure you sign up for the August meetup.
Yes, absolutely.
And alternatively, if you have 2 minutes, officially, I think the longest it took to take was 2 minutes was the feedback forms. So we can send that on to all of the presenters who were here today.
You just said what I was going to say, Julia.
I'm so sorry, Michelle.
No problem. Yeah, and I think we value your feedback. So please do take time to fill out the forms.
We'll aim to get this recording up onto YouTube probably by tomorrow afternoon. Unless Paul, Kayla, or Mizelle is feeling particularly energetic in the morning, it will definitely be up by tomorrow afternoon onto our YouTube channel. So follow either our YouTube, which we've put the link in, or any of the or LinkedIn.